May 1945, Bavaria, Germany. A wounded black American soldier was lying on an examination table in a German hospital. His leg was torn open by shrapnel. He needed medical attention immediately. A German nurse walked in, looked at him, and walked back out. Not because she was busy, not because she lacked supplies, but because of the color of his skin. My name is James Walker, and I was that soldier. I grew up in Alabama. And if you know anything about Alabama in the 1940s, you already know what that means for a black man. Separate doors, separate seats, separate worlds. From the time I was old enough to understand anything, the message was clear. You are less. You are second. You belong in the back, in the corner, in the silence. I grew up watching my father lower his eyes when white men passed. Not because he was weak, because he was smart enough to know what happened to black men who didn't. I watched my mother work herself to the bone in a white woman's kitchen, calling her ma'am even when that woman spoke to her like she was furniture. That was Alabama. That was my world. Then, in 1942, a letter came. Draft notice. I held it in my hands for a long time, stood there in our small kitchen, morning light coming through the cracked window, and I thought, why should I fight for a country that doesn't fight for me? But then I thought about my younger brother, my mother, my neighborhood, already suffering, already bleeding slow. So I went. 761st Tank Battalion. They called us the Black Panthers. Not the army, not the government. Us. We gave ourselves that name, and we earned it. Not with words, but with blood. When we first arrived, the doubt was everywhere. You could feel it in the air like smoke. White officers who wouldn't meet your eyes. Commanders who had already decided, before a single shot was fired, that black men couldn't operate tanks in combat. That we would freeze, that we would panic, that we would fail. We didn't say anything back, we just fought. France, Belgium, into Germany itself. Town after town, road after road, we pushed forward. We took positions that others said couldn't be taken. We held ground that others said couldn't be held. And slowly, slowly, the doubt in those officers' eyes began to change into something else. Respect, earned the hard way, the only way that ever lasts. General Patton himself addressed us in November 1944 before our first major action. He stood in front of us, 4 stars, ivory pistols, that jaw like carved stone, and he said, I don't care what color you are, kill Germans, that's your job. No big speech, no promises, just an order. But inside that order was something I hadn't expected. He was talking to us like soldiers, not like a problem, not like an experiment, like soldiers. That meant something. The night the shrapnel found me, April 1945, Bavaria. The war was almost over. Everyone knew it. Germany was collapsing from every direction. American forces from the west, Soviet forces from the east. Berlin was burning. But desperate men are the most dangerous men, and the Germans were still fighting. Our unit was positioned outside a small Bavarian town. The night was cold and quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you nervous because you know it won't last. Then the artillery started. First shell landed far, second one closer, third one. I never actually heard it land. I just felt the world explode next to me, a wall of heat and sound, and then nothing for a second, then pain. White, screaming pain in my right leg. I was on the ground, German soil beneath me. The sky above me was orange from fire somewhere in the distance. My buddy grabbed my arm. Walker, Walker, stay with me. I was alive, barely thinking, but alive. My leg felt like someone had shoved a burning coal inside it and left it there. Medics came, stretcher came. And then they were carrying me toward a building, a German hospital, they said. Just taken over by American forces. Medical supplies still intact, staff still present. I closed my eyes and thought, I'll be okay. They'll fix me up. This part is over. I was wrong. The hospital was clean, orderly, a proper Bavarian building. Solid stone walls, high ceilings, the smell of antiseptic in the air. They laid me on an examination table. My leg was throbbing with every heartbeat. I needed wound cleaning, sulfur powder, proper bandaging, standard stuff, nothing complicated, just someone to do it. Captain Robert Hayes was the American medical officer overseeing the German staff. He'd been working with them for 3 days, he told me later. No problems. Professional, cooperative, smooth. He went to get the nurse assigned to my room. Her name was Greta Schneider, 38 years old, 15 years of nursing experience. Trained, competent, capable, everything you'd want in someone about to treat your wound. She walked into the room. She looked at me, and she stopped. Not paused. Stopped. Like she had walked through a door and found something on the other side that she hadn't expected and didn't want. She looked at my face, my hands, my skin. Hayes said, "Nurse Schneider, please attend to this soldier's wound." She said, "No." The word landed in that room like a stone dropped in still water. Hayes blinked. "Excuse me? I will not treat him. He's wounded. He needs immediate—" "I understand. I cannot." Hayes's voice went harder. "Cannot or will not?" She looked him straight in the eye. "Both." I was lying on that table listening to all of this, my leg burning, my hands gripping the edge of the table, and something inside me, something I had spent years trying to protect, cracked a little. Here I was, in Germany, a country I had crossed an ocean to help defeat. And even here, even now, even after everything, I was still less than, still not worth touching, still a man that a woman in a hospital would rather walk away from than help. Hayes asked her directly, "Are you refusing because of his race?" She didn't deny it. She just looked at him with this calm, certain expression, like someone who had never once been told they might be wrong. "I have my standards," she said. "We are different peoples." Hayes could have argued, could have threatened, could have dragged her back into that room by her collar, but he was a medical officer, not a combat commander. He didn't have that kind of direct authority over a German civilian, so he did the next best thing. He came over to me himself, cleaned my wound with his own hands, applied the sulfur powder, bandaged my leg properly. The whole time, Schneider stood near the doorway, arms folded, watching, like she was observing something that was beneath her, but that she couldn't quite bring herself to leave. When Hayes finished, he looked at me once, just once, and in that look was an apology that he didn't have the words for. Then he walked out and wrote his report. That report went up the chain, the hospital administrator, the medical corps commander, and then, because someone understood this was bigger than a medical complaint, it went to 3rd Army Headquarters, to Patton. 1 hour later, I was still in that room, waiting for transport, when the energy in the entire building shifted. You know that feeling when someone important walks into a space? The air changes, voices drop, footsteps become careful. Patton walked through the front entrance in full uniform, 4 stars, ivory-handled revolvers on his belt. He didn't announce himself. He didn't need to. Every nurse, every doctor, every orderly in that building knew exactly who he was, within seconds. He found Hayes, said 3 words, "Show me her." Hayes walked him to the nurses' station. Schneider was there, filling out paperwork. She looked up, recognized the rank immediately, stood. Patton studied her face for a moment. Then he spoke, quietly. "You're the nurse who refused to treat my soldier." "Yes, General." "Why?" She hesitated, then chose honesty over evasion. "I have principles. I cannot simply abandon them because circumstances have changed." Patton's expression didn't move, but his voice dropped lower, the kind of low that is far more threatening than any shouting. "Principles? You mean the principles that 12 years of Nazi propaganda put into your head? The ones that tell you some human beings are worth less than others? I am not political. You refuse to touch a wounded man because his skin is darker than yours. That's what you are. Call it whatever you want. Schneider stiffened. I have the right to my convictions. You had rights. Past tense. Patton stepped closer. You lost a war. Your government surrendered. Your beliefs are not relevant anymore. What is relevant is that soldier lying in that room, who volunteered to fight, who crossed an ocean, who faced German guns and German artillery, and who is now lying on a table in a German hospital, being denied care by someone who calls herself a nurse. Patton wasn't finished. That man is a better human being than you will ever be, not because of his skin, because of his character. He chose to serve a country that doesn't always treat him fairly, and he did it anyway because it was right. You stood in a safe building, protected by men like him, and you looked at his wound and walked away. He let that sit in the air between them. Then he turned to Hayes. Captain, what else needs doing in this hospital? Hayes caught on immediately. Sir, the latrines need cleaning. The floors need scrubbing. The laundry is backed up. We're short-staffed on all of it. Patton turned back to Schneider, calm, steady, completely immovable. You have a choice. You can be a nurse, and you will treat every single patient we bring you, regardless of race, color, or anything else. Or you can clean latrines for the entire duration of the occupation. Those are your two options. Decide now. Schneider stared at him. I think she had expected negotiation, discussion, some accommodation of her position, some acknowledgement that her feelings deserved consideration. What she got instead was a 4-star general who had absolutely no interest in her feelings whatsoever. She was realizing, maybe for the first time in her life, that the world she had lived in, the world where her beliefs were not just tolerated but celebrated, was gone. Finished, and the man standing in front of her had the power to make her scrub toilets for months, and nobody was going to stop him. The silence stretched, then she broke. I will treat the patients. All of them? Yes. Say it completely. I will treat all patients, regardless of race. Patton looked at her for a long moment, making sure she understood, making sure there was no confusion about what had just happened. Then he said, Good, now go apologize to Private Walker, then get back to work. She walked into my room slowly. I watched her come in. This German woman who had looked at my wound and walked away, who had decided in that moment that her beliefs mattered more than my blood. She stopped at the side of my bed, looked at me, really looked at me, maybe for the first time. I apologize for earlier, she said. I will provide you care if needed. The words were stiff, rehearsed, not from the heart, I knew that. But I also knew something else. I was tired of being angry, tired of carrying the weight of other people's hatred inside my own chest, like it belonged to me. Tired of proving myself to people who had already decided their verdict before I opened my mouth. So I looked at her and I said simply, Thank you, Mom. That was it. No lecture, no speech, no cutting remark that would have felt good for 5 seconds and meant nothing after. Just basic courtesy from a man who had just been denied basic humanity. She left, and I lay back on that table and stared at the ceiling of that Bavarian hospital. This building in a country that wasn't mine, surrounded by a war that was finally ending, and I felt something strange. Not victory, not anger, not even peace. Just a quiet kind of exhaustion, and underneath it, barely visible, something that might have been hope. I recovered, went back to my unit, fought through the last desperate weeks of the war, came out the other side alive, which was more than some of my brothers managed. Schneider, I later heard, worked at that hospital through the entire occupation, treated black soldiers, white soldiers, all of them. Never complained again, never refused again. Did her mind change? Probably not completely. Beliefs that deep and that old don't disappear because a general told you to behave differently. But her behavior changed, and in a hospital in those weeks, that was what mattered. That was what kept men alive. Patton never wrote about this incident. For him it was one more problem solved, one more obstacle cleared, one more moment in a war full of such moments. His soldiers needed care, they got it done. But for me, it was not just a moment. It was a mirror that showed me two things at once. The first thing, that hatred can survive defeat, that a woman can lose a war and still hold on to every poisoned idea that war was built on, that changing the world on the outside doesn't automatically change anything on the inside. The second thing, that power, real power, wielded by someone willing to use it for the right reasons, can force the world to behave better even when it doesn't want to, can protect people who have spent their whole lives being told they aren't worth protecting. Patton wasn't trying to save her soul that day. He wasn't trying to make her a better person. He was trying to make sure his soldier got his wound treated. Sometimes that's enough. I came back to Alabama. Same doors, same seats, same town that hadn't moved an inch while I was gone. But I had moved. Something inside me had shifted, deep and permanent, like a bone that breaks and heals back stronger in a different shape. I had stood in a tank while Germany threw everything it had at us. I had bled on foreign soil. I had looked into the eyes of a woman who thought I was less than human. And I had said, "Thank you, Mom," and meant it, not because I agreed with her, but because I refused to let her hatred live inside me rent-free. That was mine, that quiet dignity, that refusal to become what they wanted me to be, bitter, broken, small. Nobody gave it to me. Nobody could take it away. I carried it home. I carried it into that Alabama town with its separate doors and separate seats. I carried it for the rest of my life. People sometimes criticized Patton's approach, said forcing someone to comply doesn't change their heart, said real change only comes through education, through time, through genuine transformation. Maybe they're right, but Patton wasn't running a school that day. He was running a war. And in a war, you don't always have the luxury of waiting for hearts to change. Sometimes you just need the wound to be treated. Sometimes you just need the nurse to do her job. Sometimes the most important thing isn't making someone believe the right thing. It's making sure they do the right thing, right now, while the man on the table is still bleeding. That's what happened in that Bavarian hospital in May 1945. A general showed up, drew a line, and made sure that a soldier who had given everything got at least the minimum of what he deserved. My name is James Walker. I was that soldier, and I never forgot it. If this story moved you, share it. Subscribe for more untold stories from World War II, where history's darkest moments collided with its most surprising acts of humanity.